This recording is for Gym Candy Part 3, Chapter 1. At the end of Part 2, Mick and his team had just lost a big game to Foothill, and Mick, for the first time, was starting at the running back position, and he was doing great, and he almost won it for his team, but he was 12 inches short of making that next big play and helping his team go on to the next big game. And even though he played really hard, he still blames himself for his team's loss. And Drew tells him at the end of Part 2 that Mick has all the components that make a great player. He has speed, he's got quickness, he's got knowledge of the game, but Drew tells him more power in the red zone. That's the last thing you need. So now here we are, Part 3, Chapter 1. Monday, I hung out with Drew and Deshawn at lunch and in between classes, and they kept telling me the loss to Foothill wasn't my fault. It's just because your run was the last play that everybody remembers it, Deshawn said. If it hadn't been for what you did earlier, we wouldn't have had a chance to win. Besides, did you see the arms on that guy who hit you? They were like my legs. I swear he had to have been on steroids. I think half their guys were. You think so? I said, looking first at Deshawn and then at Drew. You think they were on steroids? Drew shrugged. I don't know. You hate to call somebody a cheater without any proof, but some of those Foothill guys were just too big. For the rest of the day, my mind kept going back and forth. Was number 50 a cheater? Were a bunch of them cheaters? Had they stolen the victory? Or was I being a poor loser by making excuses? Toward the end of the day, a rumor started going around that Coach Downs was quitting. Probably they'll blame that on us too, Drew said, only half joking. Downs was a PE teacher as well as head football coach, but he had a sub Tuesday and another Wednesday, and both days he'd had meetings with the principal and the athletic director. Then on Thursday came the announcement. All football players were to attend a meeting after school. At 2:40, I went into the Commons and pulled up a chair at a table where Drew and Deshawn were slouched, heads down. Our table was way in the back and in the far left corner, away from everybody. I looked over at Matt Drager and Aaron Clark. They were sitting front and center, right where we'd have been if I'd scored the winning touchdown. Coach Downs came in at 2:45, accompanied by Hal Carlson, the custodian. Carlson, a burly black man, was a decent guy, but I had no clue why he'd be standing next to Downs, unless it was to chew us out about something going on in the locker room. About 40 other guys were sitting at tables around us. Downs strode to the front of the room and raised his hand to settle everyone. This is hard for me to say, so I'll just say it. I won't be coaching here next year. I've got an opportunity to become offensive coordinator at Pacific Lutheran, and I can't turn it down. Downs let the mummery go for a minute or two, and then he raised his hand again. You guys have been great. And Shills Hole High has been great. You're going to beat Foothill one of these years, go to the playoffs, and take it all. I know that, which makes leaving hard. Fortunately, there's one thing I don't have to worry about. I know I'm leaving the program in good hands. He turned and looked at Hal. Most of you know Mr. Carlson as the head custodian here. Starting today, he's also your head coach. Guys looked at one another in shock. From the front table, I heard Clark laugh out loud. This is a joke, right? Drager called out. Hal's not really our... Downs started to answer. This is no... Carlson cut him off. Coach Downs, I'll handle the meeting from here. Downs looked at him, pursed his lips, and then nodded. You're right, he said. Then he turned back to us. I'll be around school until the end of the semester. Stop by my office anytime you want. He walked to the door, turned back again to wave, and then left. As soon as the door closed behind him, Hal's eyes homed in on Drager. Would you like to repeat that question? Drager didn't back down. I asked Coach Downs if he was joking. About me being the coach? Yeah, about you being the head coach. You're Drager, right? And you're Clark? They both nodded. Running back and quarterback, right? Again, they nodded. The kids who got arrested? The smiles disappeared. Well, Mr. Drager and Mr. Clark, I will be reviewing your case in the next few weeks to determine what your future status on this team will be. Once I've acquainted myself with the facts, I'll let you know whether I will allow you the privilege of playing football for Shills Hole High next year. As of now, you remain suspended. Since this is a meeting for team members only, You will have to leave." Aaron Clark laughed nervously. "Are you kicking us out?" Carlson nodded. "I'm kicking you out." Drager and Clark exchanged a look, smiled at each other and at their friends, then got up and left, slamming the door behind them. My eyes, everybody's eyes, had followed them on their way out. Once they were gone, we looked back to Carlson. The fury was still in his eyes, but it was gone from his voice. "From now on, when you address me, you will call me Coach Carlson or Coach. As to team rules, there's only one word you need to remember, and that word is respect. Respect yourself, respect one another, and respect the game. Do that, and you and I will get along fine. Don't," he looked toward the door Drager and Clark had just slammed, "and you won't be playing for me." His eyes scanned the room. "All right then, now I want to hear from you. We'll start with the guys at the table in the back. Tell me your name, your position, and your year in school." One by one, players stood and gave the required information. Now and again, Carlson would ask questions. "What do you bench press?" Or "How fast do you run the 40? Or "What's your vertical leap?" It took time, but Carlson questioned every player. When he finished, he folded his arms across his chest. His forearms were huge, a lineman's forearms. "A week from Saturday, we're going down to Tacoma to watch the 4A championship game. I've arranged for a bus, and I've got tickets for all of you. Attendance is required. You've got a date with your girl? Change it. And don't even ask me if you can bring her." With that, he turned and walked out. Drew, Deshaun, and I left together. When we were clear of the other guys, Drew looked at me. "Wow," he said. "Do you think he'd really kick them off the team for good?" I said. Drew shook his head. "He's just trying to scare them." "I don't know about that," Deshaun said, smiling. "My money is on suspension, which means you two sorry souls are going to get a second chance." Drew turned to me and punched me a few times on the arm. "He might be right, Mick." So here we have Coach Downs leaving the school for another position at a different school. And the custodian of the school, Hal Carlson, steps up as the head football coach. And right away you can tell that he is going to be a different type of coach than Downs, right? Even though you weren't like a great person, Downs played you if you were a good player. And no matter how good of a player you were, if you were a freshman, he didn't respect you and he didn't start you, right? Unless there was no other option, like there was at the end of part 2. So here we have this guy who tells the team, right, there's one thing that they need to remember, and that's the word respect. So he's all about respect, respecting him, respecting the game, and respecting your teammates. And we know from part 2 that Drager, right, he doesn't have respect. Drager and Clark, they don't have respect. They don't respect their teammates. They don't really respect their coach. And Carlson picks up on that right away. And so you get this feeling that they're probably not long for this team. They're not going to be playing for him. So Drew and Mick are getting excited because as sophomores, right, they might get to play next year and start. At school the next day, Brad Middleton told us that Carlson had once been head coach at Sonoma High. We went to the library during English class, which gave me a chance to go on the internet to check it out. Snohomish High had a good web page, so it was easy to find their head football coaches. Sure enough, there was Carlson's name. He'd been head coach for 9 years. Every one of his teams had had winning records, and 2 of them had gone to the state playoffs. He'd coached his last team 5 years earlier, and they'd finished 7-3. So first the guys are like, what? The custodian of the school is going to be our new head coach? But when they go Google him, he's a great coach, right? He has been head football coach before for 9 years, right? And his teams have done really well. So they've landed themselves a great coach here in Carlson. I stared at the screen, wondering why he'd quit. Maybe he'd burned out, or someone got sick in his family, or he hated the athletic director. Whatever the reason, Snohomish had gone straight downhill once he'd left. The bell sounded. I logged off, gathered my books, and headed toward my Spanish class. In the hallway, I spotted Coach Downs. "Good luck next year, Coach," I said. "Hey, thanks, Mick," he said, and he fell in step with me. For a while, neither of us spoke, but as I started down a side hall, he stopped me. "You know, Mick, you could be a terrific player. You've got great moves, great speed. You just need to bulk up a little, get stronger. Hit that weight room harder, and there's no telling how far you can go. Now, again, Mick is hearing these words, right? He needs more power. He needs more strength. Beside that, he's a great player. I will, Coach, I said. He clapped me on the shoulder. Good luck to you. I hustled to get to class before Miss Coss called roll and just made it. I hadn't paid much attention to what Downs had said. I figured he was just talking to talk. But as Spanish class crawled along, what he'd meant came home. He was telling me I was weak, that what it amounted to when you cut through all the polite garbage. And that's what my dad had said too, though I hadn't heard it that way. They were telling me that it wasn't enough to have moves and speed. In the red zone, in those final 20 yards, power was the name of the game. Not speed, not agility, not finesse. Raw power. Okay, so this is becoming a fixation now for Mick. And we know, right, he puts everything he has into football. He wants to be the best running back there's ever been. And so now we know he has all the other parts of the game on lockdown. So he's going to focus on this one part that he still needs to master, and that is having power.